Buzz Rothfield, thank you for joining me on NRL Fans WA. Really appreciate you giving me your time.
Thank you. Very excited actually about the news last week about WA, possibility of NRL, possibility of linking up with the Bears. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you come across all that sort of news? Obviously, being a journalist, you can dig pretty deep, but how was it that you sort of found out about that sort of stuff?
I got a bit of a tip off over the summer actually, and when I got back to work after holidays in February, I made a few inquiries with politicians in Western Australia, but I kept running into dead ends, and no one was very helpful at all. But then I made inquiries with a few of my NRL contacts, and finally got the Bears to admit that they'd had talks with government officials, your sports minister, the boss of Venues West or Western Australian Venues, and they actually came to Magic Round in Brisbane last week to talk to some NRL officials, and we just went from there. And I think it's a great idea, a great opportunity for the NRL to enter a new market. We'll see how it progresses now over the next couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. Like yourself, I think it's a great idea. I've had chats with fair few ex-NRL players, like I said before, just trying to promote this page and promote league in Perth. And nearly everyone that I've talked to, because I always mention, maybe the Perth joining up with North Sydney, and a lot of them, pretty much all of them, are happy to see it because there's too many teams in New South Wales as it is. So I don't think the NRL will really look at North Sydney, or even if they go up to the Central Coast.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of good examples, and you go to the AFL and you look at South Melbourne as an AFL club, or VFL was on its knees, so they moved to Sydney and started the Swans, which is now one of the great brands in Australian sport. Happened with the Lions going to Brisbane. And Look, there's no doubt about it, the Bears have been around for since 1908. Wonderful organisation, wonderful logo, the red and black jersey. And Peter V'landys, who's the independent commission boss, told me when we're in Brisbane, whenever he gets pulled up the street, every third question is around the Bears. When are you going to bring them back? And Peter's aware of this interest from Western Australia. Basically, to get into the competition, Western Australia need the Bears and that logo and that jersey. And the Bears are incapable of doing it on their own. While they've got financial support, they don't have the corporates, they don't have the government support. They probably don't have a home ground that's capable of staging a dozen home games.
Yep.
So they need to spread their wings and get to a joint venture and a partnership, and they're really keen to do it. Just before I took this call from you, I was speaking to Billy Moore, who's a club legend, famous for his Queenslander chant from State of Origin. He's a director at North Sydney, and he explained, look, the Bears just want to get back into the competition, and they're happy to go to the NRL and ask them for advice on the best way to do it. Is it they understand that? Look, I'll just turn my phone off.
You're right.
That they understand that the Sydney market is saturated.
Yeah.
There's Manly, which is only about 10 kilometres from where North Sydney's based. There's Newcastle, there's the Sydney Reds. There's just so many Sydney clubs.
Yeah.
So to make it back, they're going to have to come up with something fresh.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Peter V'landys is of the opinion that the 18th team needs to convince the NRL they'll be in a growing market with new corporate support, new fan base. And rugby league lost so many North Sydney supporters when they were kicked out of the competition in 2000. So you get all those supporters back, plus you get a whole new army of fans in Western Australia.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think it's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it's also an attractive option for the Sydney clubs. If you're a North Sydney fan, you're probably only going to get 3 home games at North Sydney.
Yeah.
But you can go and watch them at Parramatta, Penrith, Cronulla, St George, Manly, Roosters. So what that does for those Sydney clubs, it probably brings an extra 5,000 or 6,000 fans to their games who wouldn't normally be there.
Yeah.
And what that does is improve their beer sales. It gets people into their clubs to play poker machines. It improves food sales at the vet. So it's a win for the current clubs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't, seriously, I've thought long and hard about, I can't think of any negatives.
Yeah. Well, like, because I've, I'm involved with the local competition over here as well. Like I'm a vice president of my local club at SEP, and there's no pathway system for the WA players over here. We had the West Coast Pirates, which I've got on, but due to COVID and stuff, that fell away. But I think that we're losing a lot of players between the ages of 13 to 18 because there's no pathway system for them. They go into union or AFL.
Sure.
But if they had the Bears, that association with the Bears, then they got that pathway system, and it also gives the North Sydney teams, New South Wales Cup, all those sort of SG Ball, Harold Matthews, it gives them a bigger talent pool to pick from.
Yeah, no, look, I totally agree. And you've got to look, Melbourne Storm started off like this. Melbourne Storm didn't have pathways.
Yeah.
That's the business they're in, to, create a strong, powerful club. And you know what? We can't think about 2 years' time when this new team is, or 3 years' time, when this new team is a realistic chance of entering the competition.
Yeah.
We've got to think about 20 years' time.
Yeah.
And the overall growth of the game. And we're in New Zealand, and apart from New Zealand, we're an Eastern Seaboard game. And rugby league does have to spread its wings. It's got to look at the Pacific Islands for international football, but it's got to look at major cities like Perth. And they've got to look at big picture, not short term. And they've got to look at potential growth. And the way Perth has supported the Nines tournament a couple of years ago, which I was there for, State of Origin. I met a guy from Perth at Brisbane Airport, and he was a tradie, an Irish fella, and he flew over to Magic Round with his 11-year-old daughter, and he paid a lot of money for his airfare. He paid a lot of money for his accommodation, his tickets, his food, his beverages. But the smile him and his daughter had in his face, it was just so nice. And he was telling me there's a lot of other people like that in Perth.
Yes, there is, mate. Absolutely.
And
absolutely,
it's not just about two great AFL sides there. It's, people want to watch rugby league, and you get a great coverage on Fox Sports, I understand. But look, it's a lot more to that, to have your own side, to have some ownership, to have that great Bears logo, to have a great rectangular stadium, which I understand is there in Perth and is getting money spent on, isn't it, for the Women's World Cup? And
absolutely. It's gone. I think it's a 19,000 seat stadium that they've got. So it's not overly big, but it's enough to house a decent crowd. Even if I look back at the stats from when the Western Reds were in, and they were averaging about 10, 11,000 people a game, but that was at the Wacker, where the crowd's too far away from the game.
It's not a rugby. No, it's not. It's not an A-League ground. It's a cricket ground.
Yeah, but with the new stadium, the Western Force play there, the Perth Glory play there, and when the NRL teams are coming over, they played there as well. But they've upgraded it, so it holds up to 19,000 people now. And it's a perfect stadium for it. I mean, I went there back in Darren Lockyer's last year when the Broncos played South Sydney.
Right.
And I've been there since to have a meeting with NRLWA about my page. And the stadium is just ridiculously good. They spent so much money on it.
It's really good you're doing this. I'm just trying to, keep up interest over there.
Yeah.
I know the media there have obviously focused on their AFL teams, but someone's got to do it. You're obviously doing a terrific job, and maybe it'll become something a lot bigger, down the track, because as I said to you, I've only had positive feedback.
Yeah.
There's been absolutely no backlash around it.
Yeah.
And
That's,
particularly from the television networks, they just want content and more content.
yeah.
By having a 17 team next year in Redcliffe, it doesn't give them an extra game.
Yeah.
But this having a Perth Bears side in would give extra competition, extra content. And that's all Channel 9, that's all Fox Sports want. They just want eyeballs on their TV screens. And so that would generate a lot of extra money for the NRL the next time they do a broadcast deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, talking about like the 18th team, I know the NRL, basically if North Sydney and Perth don't go together, I believe that the NRL will basically stick their second team in New Zealand. I think I know that they're keen for New Zealand team, second New Zealand team. I don't think it will work. I've talked to Nigel Bungana, who used to work for New Zealand Rugby League, and and myself, I used to live over there. And unless you're really in Auckland, it's not that big. Rugby union is the most dominant sport there, and it's where everyone says that that coming to Perth, they're coming to an AFL dominant state.
Yeah.
Well, over in New Zealand, it's even more rugby union than it is AFL over here.
Yeah, I think whereas I explained the 17 clubs are fully behind this Perth and Bears, I think there'd be considerable opposition from the New Zealand Warriors.
Yeah.
They've had a real struggle to make any impact in recent years, and they've had a tough road with COVID and being based at Terrigal and Tamworth and Redcliffe, and they're about to get home, but they don't want to be at this stage competing with another franchise in New Zealand.
Yep.
They've still got a lot of work to do themselves to properly establish themselves as a powerhouse of the NRL.
Yeah.
And I think you're taking away from them and will weaken them if supporters in New Zealand are forced to make a choice between the two sides. And I think there's far more negatives in that option than Perth.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think, with the 18th team coming in, the talent pool that they've got at the moment? I know, because I watch NRL 360 every night it's on, and you're always just saying the talent pool, especially for the Dolphins at the moment, is pretty small. How are we going to go about with the talent pool for the 18th team then?
Well, I guess it'll depend on your staff, and you'll have to hire a coach who is sort of magnetic and able to, attract some players, a bit like Wayne Bennett. We've been critical there, but they'll have a fair roster. They just need a good playmaker, and they've got a good, strong pack of forwards. There's a lot of movement coming up now in the player market in the NRL. There'll be more come November, and I'm confident that Redcliffe will be a reasonably competitive side when they come in, and I'm confident that, look, as I said, it's not a 2-3 year project. It's a long-term project, and not everyone can do it like Melbourne Storm, who miraculously won so early.
Yeah.
But you just need to put the right staff, the right recruitment boss in there. Are there enough players to go around? Well, the problem with the NRL now is that there's already, the top 4 or 5 teams have got the majority of, great players, and they're probably not evenly shared around the competition. And maybe
do you think with that? Sorry, do you think with that then the NRL maybe needs a draft?
Oh, look, the draft was tried here, but then it was thrown out. It was successfully challenged in court by the Players Union. Maybe they need something like what the AFL did with the Suns and the GWS Giants, and some salary cap discounts or pressure taken off in different areas, to ensure that they're in a position. But look, there's a lot of players here in Sydney, for example, where the housing market is just horrific. It really is. And for them to have careers in rugby league, and I'm not talking about the great players on $1 million contracts, I'm talking more the middle of the road boys.
Yeah.
And they struck, and opportunities to go and play at Redcliffe with Wayne Bennett or Perth or Melbourne, where housing is cheaper, is attractive. And I'm sure, I'm sure you'll be able to field a competitive team from day one, but you need the right staff. Got no idea who would coach them, but that's the most important call of all. Who's going to coach them? Who's going to have the ability to entice players across?
Yeah, I tend to believe the quicker that Perth and North Sydney sort of obviously nut out all the nitty gritty sort of stuff and come to an arrangement where, yep, we're going to put in a combined bid together, I think they can go chase that coach. My personal opinion would be to go for someone like Shane Flanagan if he doesn't get taken up by the Bulldogs at the end of the year, because he, like you guys said the other night on NRL 360, built the Sharks up that weren't in the greatest of positions. So he built them up to a premiership winning team. So he'd be perfect for it.
The other fella, I don't know if he'd be interested. Someone like Craig Bellamy. And I'm not talking about Craig Bellamy as a coach. I'm talking about him as a director of football.
Yeah.
Someone who could probably walk in and make the hire and fire decisions, but set the culture, attract the right players through, and someone of his standing in the game, who knows, you're paying the right amount of money and make it attractive enough for at least for the setup period. I think something like that might be a fair idea. And maybe he'd eventually decide on Shane Flanagan.
Yeah,
but you would need, in my point is, I think you would need an experienced coach. Maybe Wayne Bennett would agree to do it. Wayne likes moving around. He has for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? But that's really the face of the club and the person in charge. I'm not talking about a bean counter. I'm not talking about a chief executive.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a director of football.
Yeah.
And someone who's been around for the long time, someone who's had the experience of bringing in Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk as boys out of Brisbane competition and turning them into not just great footballers, but great people away from the game, as they're proving now in retirement.
Absolutely. And I think that, he could, we all know that his objective is to get back to Queensland for his family and stuff like that with his grandkids and all that sort of stuff. He doesn't have to be a full-time person in Perth to be able to do that director of football either. He can still stay on that eastern seaboard and I guess recruit the players and do all that sort of stuff and sort of manage his time to come over every now and then to check up on the club, I guess, and see what's going on. But I think Craig Bellamy would be perfect for it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I really do.
Yeah, that's it. Just want to jump into a bit of other questions, mate, if you don't mind.
No, far away.
Just how long have you been into the journalism game now?
I've been
started about 1978.
That was my first grand final I covered. Cronulla, Manly, and a replay on the Tuesday. I started at News Corp in 1976. Started as a copy boy. Always wanted to be a sports writer. Did a cadetship. I worked in the courts. I worked on police rounds. I worked in Parliament. And then found my way to sport where I always wanted to be. And I've been very, very lucky, actually. It's 46 years last February. I've been there. And I've seen so many changes, not just in the technology of putting out newspapers and the way we do it now, so internet dominated. The changes in sport have been quite remarkable. And, I was there covering World Series cricket way back then. And, when they put coloured clothing on and Kerry Packer put floodlights up and stole the best players from around the world and signed them to the Channel 9 network. And then you look at the changes in rugby league, in AFL, in all the sports. It's quite remarkable. And it's all around television, isn't it now, which is such a dominant force in the game. In the old days, we could go to a rugby league match and our match report would be so-and-so scored in the 8th minute, kicked the conversion, Cronulla led 6-0. 2 minutes later, South struck back, try in the corner. They missed it 6-4. And that was the whole match report. But nowadays, the game is so thoroughly covered on TV and radio. By the time you pick your paper up Monday morning, they don't want a blow-by-blow description of the game because they've seen it or heard it.
Yeah.
So we have to think up different angles and, have a good contact book to be able to tell the inside story, the backroom story, and stay in touch with the players, the agents, the CEOs, the coaches, the fans, and everything's changed so dramatically. But it's been a long time, and I'm sure it'll change again in the future.
Oh, absolutely. How did you get into being the journalist for the NRL though? I know you said you wanted to be into sports. Was it always rugby league that was your passion though?
Yeah, I grew up playing rugby league as a young fellow in Newcastle, and Newcastle's a real rugby league heartland. The Newcastle competition in those days had a guy called Terry Panowitz at Maitland, and he was playing for New South Wales, Australia. Had Father John Coots. This was long before the Knights. He was playing club football for Western Suburbs and Newcastle. It was a great comp, but I was a bit of a St George supporter. Then I came down that first grand final, Cronulla. I felt very sorry for them, and I linked up with them and live in Cronulla now. And so I was just, look, I wasn't real good at flash at school, but I told a few fibs to get in the door about my school reports. And lucky enough, as I tell any young journo now, it's all about your hunger. It's all about your initiative. It's all about giving up your weekends with your mates, while you're trying to establish yourself, work hard, get to the football, get trust from people is very important. That's the most important thing at all, because you're not going to get any contacts without trust. And these days for newspaper reporters, it's no use turning up for a press conference. You ask a good question, the answer's there for the internet, the answer's there for TV, it's there for radio. So you're better off, having your own ways of getting stories and speaking to people without something that's so widely published like a press conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was going to be my next question as well, was advice for kids coming up or people that want to get into the journalism, especially with sports. But you basically answered that. So you're just going to work hard.
Yeah, it's like anything. You got to have a passion for it. You got to be prepared to be on call 24/7.
Yep.
And you've just got to be relentless in your attitude to chase news and break stories first.
Yep.
And it is really, really competitive sports writing. There are some really sharp guys around, Danny Widler at Channel 9, Michael Chamis, Andrew Webster at my opposition. We got a great team at the telly.
Yeah.
But you just got to, that's all you can do. Go and get your degree, bang on the door of newspapers, file some copy, show us what you're made of. And it's like it's like being a young footballer. It's like being a young cop. It's like being anything, you've just got to have initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, I watch NRL 360 every night that's on. How do you find being on there? And basically, every night that you're on, you and Paul Kenner at loggerheads with each other.
Yeah, as you can see now, without the makeup, I haven't really got a head for TV. But I get on pretty good with Teddy. The arguments we have are very genuine. They're certainly not. We don't say in the green room, what are we going to have a blue about tonight? We just have differing views on just about everything, But he's got a good rugby league IQ. He knows what he's talking about. James Hooper probably irritates me a bit more because he hasn't got the miles up that Kenty's got, He can get a bit picky, but it's part of the show. How boring is it? We all agree on something. Sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand. Sometimes it doesn't,
Yeah, no, I love watching you guys on NRL 360. It's very in depth, and that's what I like, because I, doing this sort of stuff, because I've got a huge passion for rugby league. And
Yeah.
watching you guys
Yeah,
talk
I
about it,
gathered
going
that,
into
yeah.
depth.
Tell you, he's doing a terrific job, Braith Astor, I think, as the new
Yeah,
host.
yeah,
It
absolutely
was
is.
really, really hard for him to follow in someone like Ben Eichen,
Yep.
and then Yvonne Sampson, who is just first class. Really, really good operator who went off to become a mum.
Yep.
And so Braith was stepping into big shoes there. But, he's been around the traps a long time, very impressive dude. Sometimes it's hard for him to talk as a manager of Braith and Astor, but we try to keep him honest. And, if there's a question to be asked, we ask it and don't hold back just because could be in an awkward position. So, no, Braith's good. And, it's a good show. The numbers this year have been terrific. A lot of people watching it. Magic Round last week was not just an enormous success for the NRL at the turnstiles. 130,000 turned up in appalling weather conditions, the first 2 days at least. But for Fox Sports, it was their biggest round ever in the history of them broadcasting rugby league. And to knock off the figures from COVID, when we were all at home, locked down, couldn't get outside, and we had nothing else to do but watch football, but they broke that record last weekend.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
The game is actually flying.
Yep.
Like you look, Penrith had a sellout the week before. Manly had a sellout on a Saturday afternoon at Brookvale. Now that 3 o'clock time slot, you're normally at junior sport, shopping, cafes, lunch. But they sold out. It was extraordinary. And this is why I'm so excited about finding another fan base. As I've said, we're so saturated in Sydney now, and there's still this great hunger for the game. But future growth can only come from new areas like Perth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, mate. Just last thing before I let you go, mate, and because I know you're a busy man. Is there anything you want to say to obviously the volunteers and stuff? Especially in Perth here, they're getting behind the game, trying to grow the game, and helping out the kids and the seniors that are playing. Is there anything you want to say to the volunteers?
I love volunteers. I was involved in the junior club here in Quinella when my son was playing at De La Salle Caringbah. You walk past and you look at the mums who are managing teams, the dads who are coaching, the people running the canteens, doing the barbecues, working the bars. And without them, we don't have a game, do we? Because they're the ones who allow the kids to play every weekend, wash the jerseys, all those jobs I'm talking about. And without them, there is no rugby league. We don't have a pathway system. And good on them, and they deserve a rugby league team, and I'm sure they are going to. I'm very, very confident they are going to get one. So keep up the great work. Eventually, with an NRL side, the numbers are only going to increase. You're going to need more volunteers. You're going to need more feet on the ground to run these competitions. But I'm sure I can tell from the passion in your voice, just as we discuss all this, that there's a lot of good people in Perth who are determined to make this happen. A government that's prepared to throw some coin in, good sponsors, and a great brand, the North Sydney Bears. They won't be the North Sydney anymore, but they'll be back in business, and it can only be a great thing for rugby league. So congratulations on what you're doing, and keeping the interest up in Western Australia. It's a really good thing, and in 20 years' time, I won't be around covering rugby league, but I'm hoping there will be a really successful Perth franchise.
No, I really appreciate that, mate. You're probably going to be over here for State of Origin, mate. So if you do come over,
I'll look you up for sure.
Yeah, let me know. And you can come over, or we'll go out for dinner or coffee or something like that while you're over here.
We might even have a sneaky beer.
That's it, mate. I'll be at the game, so don't worry about that. I've already got my tickets.
Good on you. Thanks so much for your time.
No, thanks, Buzz, for joining me on NRL 360, mate. Best of luck with everything else.
NRL 360?
Oh, Jesus. NRL. We've been talking about it. NRL Fans WA. Sorry, mate.
No, of course. Thank you.
Thanks mate. Have a good day.
Cheers. Bye.